If you or a loved one are struggling with type 2 diabetes, you should visit the link in the description below. This clinically proven, drug-free program lowers blood sugar to a normal level and can completely reverse type 2 diabetes within just a few weeks. Here's today's video.
The question, what ideas do you have that anyone can apply to reverse type 2 diabetes? Answer by Wayne Bodolick. Type 2 diabetes, T2, cannot be reversed or cured. It can, however, be controlled. The distinction is that cured and reversed imply that the condition can be removed. T2 is with you forever. It's a genetic condition, and the resulting biochemical fault will never go away or stop. The same is true, BTW, for the other two forms of diabetes mellitus, D1 and TEC. In T2, the body cells resist the action of insulin. Insulin's job is to facilitate the transfer of glucose from the bloodstream into the cells. When the cells resist that, too much glucose gets left behind in the bloodstream, and BG, blood glucose, aka blood sugar, levels get too high. The body tries to overcome this by overproducing insulin, which at first, prior to DXS diagnosis, works. Until it doesn't any longer, and the patient starts suffering symptoms of elevated BG, frequent urination, excessive thirst, and fatigue. Since carbohydrates are the primary, not the only, source of glucose in our diets, limiting carbs is the primary and most important step to reduce BG levels. There are 3 macronutrients available to us: proteins, fats, and carbs. So by getting fewer of your total calories from carbs, and more from proteins and fats, you can keep your caloric intake at the appropriate level while minimizing your carb intake. This is where it gets tricky. How many calories an individual needs is based on a lot of factors: height, weight, activity level, metabolic rate, environment, ambient temperature and pressure actually do affect caloric need. All impact how many calories you need, and can vary a lot from day to day. But whatever your caloric needs are, best established by you and your doc or nutritionist, you want to reduce your carb source significantly. Typically, dietitians will use 40% as the carb proportion, but that is too high for a diabetic of any type. A ketogenic diet is near zero carbs, and that is too low for most folks. It's too hard to maintain for an extended period, and it's unnecessary for most people. Each individual's level of insulin resistance is different, so no one can speak for you. But your BG meter can. By testing BG levels before and after meals, you can learn how many carbs you can tolerate. By testing regularly, and adjusting the amount of carbs in your meals, downward, until you reach acceptable levels of BG before and after meals, you'll bring your BG levels into control, and that will bring your HbA1c levels into control. Before meals, a non-diabetic, will be below 100 mg/dl. AD should be below 110 mg/dl. About 1 hour after the meal, measured from the first bite, but it varies, anywhere from 45 to 90 minutes after, BG will peak, no more than 120 in a non-D, no more than 140 in a D. In short, you don't want your BG to rise more than 30 mg/dl from the meal. By an hour after the peak, BG is back to pre-meal level in a non-D, below 110 in the D. You will not see those #S at the start. The point is to test, and whatever #S you do see, adjust your meal's carb content until you do see those #S. Docs mostly focus on fasting BG, which should be below 100 mg/dl in non-Ds, but that's only a diagnostic measure. To gain control, you need to be paying attention to what meals are doing to your BG. Here's a page that outlines the process quite well: test, review, adjust. On carbs themselves, carbs is carbs, it doesn't matter what form it is, 1 gram of carbs is 1 gram of carbs. But there are fast carbs, sugar, bread, candies, and slow carbs, potatoes, corn, and everything in between. While getting your carbs in a slow form is better for avoiding sudden spikes, your body still must deal with them. Just because a carb is a slow processed form doesn't make it free, it just means the BG rise will be slower. All carbs are simply sugar chains, comprised of the molecules carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Exercise is of critical importance to controlling D, of any type. In T2, it's a tad more critical, because physical activity, of any kind, improves cellular sensitivity to insulin, which is the underlying problem. The activity must be regular. In order to maintain cellular sensitivity, you have to get exercise most days. At least 30 minutes a day, at least 4 or 5 days a week, has been demonstrated to be a minimum to maintain an improved cellular response to insulin. Simply walking is enough to achieve this. And that can be done in the neighborhood, at the mall, or on a treadmill. But getting out and moving around is necessary. If you're not ready for that much, start with what you can handle, and increase it over time. Over time, you will find yourself wanting to increase it, you'll feel better, and find it makes you feel more better each time. So, those are the diet and exercise components of every T2S management plan, or should be. Even with meds, those steps are necessary. T2 is not a take a pill and you'll be fine kind of disease. It doesn't go away, so those steps must be maintained. If they're not, your BG will rise too high again. One last note. If you have success at getting your BG down into range, but then have some lapses in BG tests that are out of range, do not stress. BG tests are just data points on which to base future behaviors. While you always want to be trying to keep your BG in range, for otherwise healthy Ds, that would be about 80 to 140 mg/dl. You have to accept that sometimes, you're gonna have some highs. Think like a hockey goalie. Sometimes, you gotta drag the puck out of the net and send back to center ice for the restart. Don't stress, just get back in the game. Answer by Jessica Spitty. A ketogenic diet for diabetic has many benefits for people with diabetes. Ketogenic diet is a very low-carb diet, considered to be when you eat a level of carbohydrate of around 30 grams of carbohydrates per day or below. This encourages the body to get its energy from burning body fat, which produces an energy source known as ketones. Ketogenic diet for diabetic helps to lower the body's demand for insulin, which has benefits for people with type 1 and diet works on a ketogenic diet. Blood glucose levels are kept at an low but healthy level, which encourages the body to break down fat into a fuel source known as ketones. People on insulin will typically require smaller doses of insulin, which leads to less risk of large dosing errors. The diet helps burn body fat. The most common cause of type 2 diabetes is obesity-related, which generally follows a vicious cycle pattern. Diet high in calories, particularly if high in refined carbohydrates. Insulin levels in the bloodstream rise to cope with the high and quick-acting carb intake. Weight is gained around the belly, central or truncal obesity. Consistently high insulin levels lead to the body cells becoming resistant to insulin and commonly lead to weight gain. High insulin levels also increase weight gain. Insulin resistance leads to an increase in blood sugar levels, particularly after meals. A pancreas produces more insulin to cope with rising blood sugar levels. High sugar levels lead to feelings of lethargy, and high insulin levels lead to increased hunger. Hunger often leads to overeating and lethargy, with less physical activity being taken. Overeating, less activity, and high insulin levels all lead to further weight gain and more insulin resistance. Consistently high demand on the pancreas to produce extra insulin leads to damage of the pancreas insulin-producing beta cells. Beta cell damage results in the body struggling to produce enough insulin, and steeper rises in blood sugar levels leads to more recognizable symptoms of diabetes. Symptoms of diabetes, such as thirst and a frequent need to urinate. Many people with type 2 diabetes are overweight, so a high-fat diet can seem unhelpful. The goal of the ketogenic diet is to have the body use fat for energy instead of carbohydrates or glucose. A person on the keto diet gets most of their energy from fat, with very little of the diet coming from carbohydrates. Answer by Janet Parker. Type 2 diabetes can be controlled with weight management, food choices, and exercise. Basically, an overall healthy diet, appropriate for a desirable weight, is going to be the same as a diabetes management diet. One major difference is to avoid simple carbs between meals. Fruits, for instance, should be consumed with a meal to delay their absorption. Grains should be high fiber and minimally refined, and consumed in small portions, 4 ounces, not a huge pile of pasta or mashed potatoes. You'll need to educate yourself about glycemic index and glycemic load, which are measures of how food impacts your insulin, and thus your blood sugar. https://www.gizimble.com/aboutg. From the Glycemic Index Foundation. Glycemic Index for 60-plus foods, Harvard Health. Janet Parker's answer to how do I make my own healthy diet? Lose weight. Almost all type 2 diabetics are overweight. Janet Parker's answer to what is the best weight loss diet, a good idea, especially if your diagnosis is new, is to seek out a certified diabetes educator. Just do a search for that term with your zip code. Your insurance will possibly cover at least a few sessions if your sugar is controlled over time so that your hemoglobin A1C is within normal range for an extended period. You may be considered controlled, but never stop your medication unless it is okayed by your doctor.